Hello, Australia. We are Laurie Horesh over here, Phil Murphy, and we are the NFL Brekkie Show for Week 7, and we are brought to you by the Next Gen Ford Everest. Conquer every day in the Next Gen Ford Everest. Laws, we have the Week 7 finale coming up. I'm here about 16 kilometers from Gillette Stadium. I'll be heading over after this live show completes for the Monday Night Football finale, Tuesday morning on ESPN. Bears against the Patriots. It is a gloomy, rainy, wet day in New England. We'll discuss later who that favors with our prop a gander. But Laws, we take a gander at the NFL calendar. And again, this is the People's Show. So if you have any contribution to this next topic in particular, please send it along. Laurie's watching the screen. We're going to be your tradesmen because approximately 1 week from tomorrow, so 8 days time, almost exactly, 4 p.m. New York time in the U.S. on the 1st of November. It's 7 a.m. Sydney, Melbourne time on the 2nd of November. It is the NFL trade deadline, the point of no return for trades between teams, players going to contenders, picks going to teams rebuilding. So, Laws, we are playing tradesmen and proposing a couple trades on general managers' behalves.
I love this time of year. I love free agency opening. I love draft season. I love the trade deadline, which has not compared to the NBA trade deadline historically, but it's picked up steam as contracts have become more fungible, Phil. Did you like that? That's my arts degree coming into use there. As they become more malleable and movable, teams have become more open-minded with how they take on guaranteed money and structured contracts. The flow of talent has increased. I think my theory, sitting up at all hours of the night, thinking, what do we make of this 2022 NFL season? My theory is that because we have such a fat, juicy, stacked middle class of the NFL with so few at the top and a couple starting to filter down at the bottom, but because there's so many teams around that 3-4 win mark that think we could be in this, I think that gives teams a lot of thought that, hey, if we make that move, can we stick our head above the pack? Can we burst through that chunky bourgeoisie of the NFL, Phil? Whew, really am tapping into the Sydney Uni days today. Can we burst through that and emerge as one of the upperclassmen of this season? So we're firing up the old trade machine, the trade factory. I don't know how many more industrial terms I can come up with, but as I mentioned, the degree is firing today. I'm feeling philosophical, so we'll see. But let's get right into it. We want your trades. We want your dream trades. This is a time where hope doesn't spring eternal. Hope could be renewed, or perhaps you're just like, nah, ready to sell the farm. Let's go and stack up draft picks for next year, particularly if you're a quarterback-needy team. Indianapolis. So first trade that I'm looking at, Phil. News coming in today that the Jets have lost another offensive lineman. Elijah Vera Tucker is joining Breece Hall on the season-ending injury list. A huge loss there on the offensive line for Gangrene, a team that I think should be buyers. They've already bought on the offensive line this year. That has happened. They brought in Dwayne Brown to get going at left tackle after Mekhi Becton set to miss another season. I'm having them go in once more. They're giving a call to Jacksonville Jaguars. I think the Jaguars are still on an upward trajectory on a whole, but in this 2022 season, 2 wins, 5 losses, starting to look a certain way, as bad as the AFC South is. Given they have Walker Little sitting on the bench there and they have Cam Robinson entrenched, they've got their tackles. I would look at Jawan Taylor, who's having a nice season, a good asset, not necessarily a long-term option, but young, 24 years old, mid-20s player, talent, offensive line. Is never a shortage of buyers for offensive line help. I'm giving a call. If I'm the Jets, I am calling the Jags and saying, hey, what do we flick here? Even if it's a day 2 pick, but what do we do here to acquire some offensive line help for our right side of the line to keep this train moving? Because the Jets should be buyers. The Jets should be looking at this as a playoff season, a huge step forward. And the last thing you want to see is an offensive line that's been improved, start to take some stumbles backwards, and then we start to see the bad habits of Zach Wilson. When they do arise, they can get entrenched when you have negative play in front of you. Your eyes drop down. You start feeling less settled and less confident you read. So that's my first one. Surprise, surprise. We're talking young quarterbacks and offensive linemen, but the Jags have a rare amount of resource there. And I think this would be a great time to take advantage, build up some assets for a player that perhaps is not looking as a future starter for that team.
Laz, I'll stay in the offensive line theme, and I'll go to the defending, reigning Super Bowl champions and a team that is on our air today. I have Isaiah Wynn going to the Los Angeles Rams. Isaiah Wynn has done the unofficial trade request of removing all Patriots references from his social media pages. His move from left tackle to right tackle, frankly, just has not worked out in New England. And he could use some greener pastures, perhaps those at SoFi Stadium, with an offensive line that has been brutalized, going from, we got to say it, the fourth best team in the AFC East. I think the Patriots are going to win today and probably do so fairly comfortably, but that's more of a statement about the Bears than it is the Patriots' potential. I think they are at least a step behind the Dolphins and Jets in that second tier of the AFC East. Strike while the iron's hot with Wynn before he really cools off. Go send him to a team that has a wide open division. Conversely, who is the best team in the NFC West? Are we ready to crown Seattle, who sits in first place now? I'm not. But the 49ers showed some flaws, even with adding Christian McCaffrey to the fold. They got blown out by the Chiefs. That game was never as close as a score suggested. And then at the end, it was pretty reflective of it. And the Cardinals, I am selling hard on. So for the Rams, who had 5 offensive line combinations in the first 5 weeks, you got somebody who has been placed at right tackle in New England, probably prefers left tackle. The Rams still haven't gotten over the loss of Andrew Whitworth. They have depth issues everywhere. Get him a fresh start and get the Rams another piece as they look to pip a division title like they did last year. The 4 seed in the NFC got hot in January and ended up winning a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I had Isaiah Wynn on my list as well, and the Rams were one of the teams that I was looking at there. So we're in lockstep there because it has aged so terribly for him in Foxborough. It's time for a fresh start. You hope there's talent there. And just an interesting player in that a lot of people projected him to actually slide inside to guard when he came to the NFL. The Patriots thought different. There were some early returns that were positive, but it has been a sliding scale. And as you said, we've hit that fork in the road when you remove everything on your social media referencing your current team. We know that there's rarely a U-turn.
If it was MySpace, they'd be out of his top 8 laws.
Unless money talks, but this isn't a contract situation like a Kyler Murray or something like that. This is just a time for a young player that showed promise to move on and hopefully find renewed, as you mentioned, green pastures at a place that could certainly use an upgrade in talent, because that Rams offensive line has just crumbled that operation so far this year. Okay. I'm looking at my moves here, and I've noticed kind of a Bermuda triangle of related moves between teams and teams and teams. I'm going to flick over to the wide receiver side here now. And wide receivers are often one of the most fun positions to prognosticate about where we might send people, because we just think, oh, talent slot in with quarterback that's struggling. How could it not end in explosive 75-yard touchdowns? But that's where I'm going anyway, Phil. Back in Jacksonville, you watch the Jacksonville Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence throws for over 300 yards. A day littered with lovely, lovely throws, but nothing really deep downfield. The route tree seems to be compacted there. I want to see it opened up. I'm going to turn to the Denver Broncos, and there's a wide receiver that's on everybody's lips in terms of being moved, and that's Jerry Jeudy. But I'm not jumping to the top of the pile just yet. I'm going with KJ Hamler. I think a versatile weapon with undeniable juice. He's had some injuries, but I think a player that can give them that downfield element, because it's not really coming from the Marvin Joneses of the world. And Christian Kirk has seen a lot of touches in and around the line of scrimmage in Jacksonville. I think KJ Hamler, no, it's not getting him out of the conference. It's AFC to AFC, but it's getting him out of the division when you start to think of other wide receiver needy teams that might be a little closer to home for the Denver Broncos. So KJ Hamler, I'm sending him over. I've just mentioned the Jags have shipped off a tackle. They've got extra resources there after that big trade. So I see them. I just think it could really open up and elevate and really get, it's, I think, like a force multiplier for their offense in general. It's not the biggest name in the world, but the type of skill set complements what they have and really could lift the top off an offense that has shown a lot of promise. Like, you watch a Jags game and there is so much to like when Trevor Lawrence is throwing the ball. You just kind of wish you expanded it and extrapolated it over a wider part of the field. Make them cover every blade of grass. I think Hamler would do that. So that's my next trade. Denver on the phone. Sellers in this situation. KJ Hamler over to Jacksonville. And I think we get a more fun edition of the mighty fighting Jacksonville Jaguars.
Well, and you said the margins are small, Oz. I mean, half a yard is all that separated them from having an extra point to beat the Giants in that game. And Christian Kirk tackled inside the 1 yard line as time expired. Margins so small for the Giants. Now, I don't know if you have the Jags as buyers or sellers because they've bought and they've sold. Maybe they don't know, but I don't trust the Colts in that division. I think the Titans are going to be the class of it, but on a given Sunday, I can see the Jags beating Tennessee. Denver is clearly going to be a seller. It pains me to say it, but they're in a situation right now as a Broncos supporter. They've invested $250 million in a quarterback that's averaging them 16 points a game. Hi, Brad. And they have the least draft capital in the NFL. They have 5 total picks in this draft, none before, I want to say 71 as it stands. Seattle having Denver's first and second round, which is aging beautifully for Seattle. So Denver for me is a seller. And Laz, I hate selling this player because I called you when he was drafted. I was dancing in my basement when I heard the Denver Broncos select Jerry Jeudy, wide receiver, Alabama. All the skills and the route tree and everything that he's done this season since his week 1 game against Seattle, which the stats even there were skewed by a busted coverage on a 67-yard touchdown. He's averaging 2.6 receptions per game. He's averaging 37 receiving yards per game. I am trading him to a surprise buyer. Not a surprise in that anything with draft capital. Their draft capital is moderate, but they have enough to go get a Jerry Jeudy. The New York Giants, they're sitting here in a wild card position, and they're looking in their division. I don't have them as the best team in their division, and I think if they took an honest look in the mirror, they would say a division title is a long shot, but a wild card trip is not. They have an opportunity, especially if they continue to perform well outside of the division, to get to 11 wins. Now you look at what they've been able to do in fourth quarters, and look at the game against Jacksonville. They entered that fourth quarter down 4 points. They had 0 completions. They won by 6 points. It's the Tennessee Titans school of comebacks that we just don't understand. The economics don't work out, but it's been indicative of this team. Daniel Jones has 5 game-winning drives this season. Laz, in those 5 game-winning drives, he has 10 total completions. None of those completions, none of those beyond the marker. And the longest was a 6-yard pass. I'm stealing those stats from my buddy Doug Clausen over at CBS Sports HQ. He tweeted that out. He also pointed out that in those drives, Saquon Barkley's accounting for 61% of their yards. I don't fault that offense under Brian Daboll from going that route because as Daniel Jones drops back to pass and he looks, he's got 26 for a long handoff or an actual handoff, but then is it Darius Slayton? Is it Marcus Johnson? Is it Wan'Dale Robinson? Is it David Sills? I could be making up names. I'm not, but I could be making up names for their receivers. You put Jerry Jeudy in the mix. Now we have somebody who defenses need to key on because of his skill set, and the Giants having just lost tight end Daniel Bellinger perhaps for the season with a fracture to his eye socket. He's going to be on the shelf for some time. If he comes back, it's not going to be later on, and there is a possibility he doesn't come back again this season. Well, now you need a red zone target. We know the catch radius that Jerry Jeudy has. We know the ball skills he has. You put him on that team. It's another piece as the Giants look to claw and fight and scrap their way to 10 or 11 wins and a wild card berth.
Okay. I have 3 things to say. One, as someone who just spent on acquire or bringing in Wan'Dale Robinson to the Sandy Cohen's eyebrows fantasy football operation that I am involved in, I resent your just throwing him in there with the mix. I think he's got phenomenal fancy footwork. But your point is well made about where the wide receiver core is now, and throwing someone like Jerry Jeudy.
First round pick Tony. I didn't mention Kenny Golladay, who they spent $1 million, $70 million on.
Probably not worth mentioning Kenny Golladay at this point, but Wan'Dale Robinson and Jerry Jeudy together, that's a lot of fancy footwork that you're working with. Second point, don't look at this as an investment in, just Daniel Jones, what can we get more out of from the passing game? Look at this as an investment in Brian Daboll, really. He has shown you what he's able to do already, what type of ceiling he's able to lift with, it's not, I don't want to say gimmicky offense. You don't want to denigrate what they're doing, but there's a lot of bells and whistles. There's a lot of, hey, look over here, look what we're doing to kind of create some confusion in the defense before operating, as you mentioned, a somewhat limited passing attack, we'll call it, or somewhat concentrated in how they get things done, not to mention the running threat. We'll touch on that a little bit later. So yeah, I think I'd look at this and let's get some more talent, not just around our quarterback, but around our head coach and our offensive mastermind who is showing so much. Third point I want to touch on, because I threw this one out last night. I want to get some of the fan responses in here. And I'll remind you again, throw in your dream trades in the comments here. Let us know. Or if we've brought up a trade that you think is completely and utterly, and I'm going back to the well here, Phil, wackadoo, let us know. Chastise, castigate, and we'll get defensive or completely cop that we were talking sideways. Like when I had the Jags as a seller and a buyer, you got to think there's big picture selling, getting in more talent for big picture buying, getting more talent for Trevor Lawrence, and there's short term kind of benefit selling when you've got a luxury or a boon of resources at a certain position like offensive tackle. But, okay, Phil, let me know what you think. Let's go through these. Okay, some of the fan ones we got in. Okay, Brad, friend of the show. Rams or Cowboys to trade for Robert Quinn, so a former home for Robert Quinn and his pass rushing exploits, finding his way back to the Dallas area or Los Angeles. Question about how much of a buyer Los Angeles are at this point. It'd be frightening to see Robert Quinn lining up there with the likes of Mike Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, Sam Williams coming on, Dante Fowler having moments. It'd be Dorrance Armstrong as well. That might be a little much in Dallas. What do you reckon?
Yeah, Laz, I think that edge rushing position is going to be a pretty significant spot of investment for teams. There's going to be a lot of people who are calling for Robert Quinn. There are going to be a lot of people calling for Bradley Chubb. Yep. Brian Burns, we heard from the Panthers, they rejected 2 first-round picks for Brian Burns, a team that in the Panthers, prior to trading away Christian McCaffrey and Robbie Anderson, they had very little draft capital, being on the wrong end of an investment in Sam Darnold. So I think those types of players
believe that they turned a lot of down. Do we totally believe that they turned down 2 first-round picks for Brian Burns?
I mean, we'll know in a week. Right now, I mean, I don't totally believe it, but that's the report.
As good and talented as Brian Burns is, you have to think that the Panthers are an optimistic 2 to 3 years, 3 years away from being good. Now he's 27, 28 years old by the time you're actually good, and you're paying him a whole lot of money. 2 first-round picks to come in and help you in a spot where you are undoubtedly in the market for quarterbacks.
The point remains there will be suitors, plural, for all the players: Quinn, Chubb, Burns.
We got some familiar names here. New York Giants trade for Jerry Jeudy or a receiver I'm about to be mentioned, so he's thinking along the same lines as you. Eagles trade for Bradley Chubb. I don't even know what to do with that. I don't think it happens, but oh my Lord, that defensive line would be it's already a dominant force.
That's the idea, though. Overwhelm. I mean, we saw it happen in a Super Bowl down at Raymond James Stadium.
If there's a team to pull off that type of move, it's going to be
Howie Roseman.
The team in Philadelphia or the team with a legitimate, their own home stadium in Los Angeles, not just renters in the Chargers. Cowboys trading for the man you mentioned, Isaiah Wynn. Look, Cowboys could use some depth there. They've just had some of their young Matt Willets goes out for the season. Looks like with an injury there, you could get some depth in behind there. But I think the Cowboys are quietly happy with how that offensive line is coming along this season, given where expectations were. And the Broncos trading for Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt's an interesting name. We might bring him up a little bit later, but I just don't see the Broncos as buyers. As much as it makes, given what's happened in the backfield there with Melvin Gordon's decline and obviously Javonte Williams out the season. But Phil, I don't know, your Broncos are home to you. You don't see them adding a running back?
That's not the solution to what's ailing them.
There you go.
I could see him going. We talked about this. Breece Hall going down for the year for the Jets. I think he's a serviceable replacement. I think the Jets are going to be doing some buying at the deadline, and he's somebody who I would put there potentially. They're going to be suitors for him as well.
All right, going through a few more of these, some more Chubb thoughts here. We've got Alex King really feeling it for the Bills right now. My Bills shouldn't need anything for the Super Bowl run. But, God, I would love Saquon in the backfield. I think that's a fool's dream there, mate. The way things are going with not just how the Giants, how their record looks, but how they're getting these victories. I don't think Saquon is going anywhere anytime soon.
He's a free agent at the end of the year. They're going to run him into the ground if they don't plan on extending him. But Laz, I do have one for the Bills. They don't lack much, but I think they could use some defensive backfield depth. They've had some injuries there. They had some injuries there last year. I pegged Deshaun Elliott from the Lions as a potential candidate. Not a splashy pick, but the Bills don't have loads of draft capital to unload, so I don't think they're going to get anybody too splashy. Elliott was benched in that shutout loss to New England. Clearly, he doesn't factor in to the Lions' long-term plans, and I think, honestly, in Detroit, they saw what happened. 5 turnovers in the second half against Dallas last week. They need to land a top 3 quarterback, so they're going to be – I think they're going to be sellers here. And then the Bills, they would get somebody who at least has, playoff experience with the Ravens to add some veteran leadership to that defensive backfield alongside, Von Miller, who has loads of valuable playoff and Super Bowl experience. So I think that's the profile of somebody the Bills would add.
You mentioned the Dallas word there. The Cowboys bringing in Elijah Moore. That's what Patrick Drew's got. Look, Elijah Moore with speed in the 4.3s. No one in the Dallas Cowboys starting wide receiver slots runs faster than really a 4.5. Even Jalen Tolbert, it's been a slow arrival for him in Dallas. He ran like a 4.49, a 4.49, I think. So it's a different element there. An interesting name. I've got Elijah Moore heading somewhere else, but a good one there from Patrick. And I think my favorite one that I got in here, and this is from Josh Y. The 49ers trade multiple picks and Trey Lance to the Colts as Kyle Shanahan just can't help himself and gets another running back in Jonathan Taylor. I love it. I love the creativity. I love the optimism in the face of nihilism from a Colts fan. But yeah, why not? Why not? I mean, Kyle Shanahan, Christian McCaffrey, why not have a backfield that Jimmy Garoppolo didn't show you that he's up for dueling the best of the best in the absolute beatdown that the Niners copped at the hands of the Chiefs. So why not just go full backfield wildness and have McCaffrey and JT in the same backfield?
Yeah, run a wing T. If you're going to allow more than 9 yards per play against the Chiefs, the most Patrick Mahomes' team has ever got in any game, 81 professional games from Mahomes.
All right.
That's where, just run a wing T, shorten the game.
We've got a few more to get through of our own, but I will tee up my next one with I want the Lions to trade for a reason to keep watching football this season from Ben. Fair enough, Ben. What started as kind of, hey, they're sparky and hey, they're giving it frisky and they give it a go.
Smoke and mirrors, man. Hard Knocks does it. It gets you interested.
It does every single time. All right, my next one here. I mentioned Elijah Moore. I am taking the want away, and Elijah Moore is reportedly back in the Jets facility, had the week off after the trade request. The word is they're not getting traded. I don't believe any of those things until the trade deadline passes. Elijah Moore mentioned the speed. That's an element we were talking about adding to the Los Angeles Chargers offense, which still feels stressed and constrained and restricted as it is. That felt that way with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen healthy on the field. Keenan Allen's been out. He returns soon. Mike Williams now out for a period of time as well as he goes down with an injury. So they're really struggling at the wide receiver spot there. I bring in I send Elijah Moore from the Jets, send him to the other coast, get him over to the Chargers, open up that offense a little bit. I'd love to see how he works. This Elijah Moore trajectory is not something anyone predicted, even with the investment in like Garrett Wilson in the draft. He was so exciting and hit the ground in such smooth form right off the bat as a rookie. But it's obviously aging poorly there in New York. So I would love to see more and that speed and that versatility shipped over to a Chargers offense that just looks punishingly stale considering the absolute star they have under center there in Justin Herbert.
Yeah, I agree, Laws. Justin Herbert, 9 for 24 yesterday on passes, more than 5 yards downfield, 37.5%, 9 for 24. That's not going to cut it. He's got long handoffs all day to Austin Eckler, which benefited you in propaganda last week, but I digress. Marquez Callaway is one that I have on the move. A team that we circled and we think is going to be in the wide receiver market. Whether it's a KJ Hamler or a Jerry Jeudy, I'm going to go with Marquez Callaway. Get a little more. They need lots more wide receiver experience. Callaway coming from a team that I don't think is going to necessarily be a seller in the Saints. They just don't have that much draft capital at all. So I do think they're going to look at a position where they have some depth and try and accrue some draft capital from a desperate team in the Packers. Callaway last season had better than 15 yards per reception. Aaron Rodgers just isn't jiving with these rookies, but in truth, he's never jived with rookies. If you go back to 2008, and not even just Aaron Rodgers, but any team in the NFL, the Packers have the fewest passing touchdowns to rookies since 2008, and the second fewest passing yards and second fewest receiving yards to rookie targets of any team. Now, that's not all on Rodgers this year because Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, we can circle back-breaking drops that they had in other games. Callaway, yeah, he was at fault for the pick six against the Cardinals, but he's otherwise known as a pretty sure-handed receiver. And for an Aaron Rodgers who the last 2 years on those long throws, 20 or more yards downfield, 42%, and he won MVP both those years. That's down to 27% this year, and none of those, 0, have been to any of his rookie targets. He averages 4 more air yards per target to veterans than he does rookies. So let's get him another veteran. Let's get another leader in that receiving room to be alongside a Randall Cobb and a Sammy Watkins and some of the guys who I'm mentioning who have had injuries, and that could be the piece for the Packers in a division that I still think is wide open. I'm not buying on the Vikings yet, so I do think Marquez Callaway could be the difference in the Packers not contending. They have loads of issues, but winning the NFC North and then maybe figuring it out in January.
B-League says, with Miami not picking up Gesicki's contract and Schultz struggling with PCL issues still, that would be an interesting move if Miami weren't going to keep him about at the end of the season, sending Mike Gesicki to Dallas. Look, if this was the 2021 Dallas Cowboys roster and it was Schultz having those issues, I'd say that's interesting. But I think Dallas is quietly very, very intrigued by how much two young tight ends in Jake Ferguson and Pendershot there at the tight end position are coming along. Pendershot gets a touchdown to cap off the Cowboys win over the Lions this week. So Peyton Hendershot there. So I think they're probably pretty intrigued by the young, cheap talent they have in mid-round to undrafted acquisitions that they had there, that I think Schultz probably does move on at the end of the season. But for me, I think this is if we're talking about this in the 2021 roster, makes a bit more sense. But I think they've got some talent coming through. They feel pretty good there. Phil, Kenny Golladay to the CFL. Who says no?
The Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
There you go. And I've got one more, and the Cowboys mentioned here. I've staved off sending anyone to Dallas just yet, but I've got an intra-divisional trade. William Jackson clearly wants out. He's fallen out of the pecking order. The Commanders are a team that I think we know where this season is going. It's not like they have 0 wins or 0 in the win column, but I don't think anybody has high hopes about where this season is going. And we also have some questions about the future of the franchise as well. William Jackson has talked about wanting to play more man coverage, not wanting to be in the zone system. Yeah. Team that ranks very highly in man looks and has moved that way under the Dan Quinn 2.0 era is the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys just lost Jordan Lewis. He's their slot corner for the season, was playing well. And Anthony Brown has not had a good season after a very strong 21-22 campaign, has been in real trouble. I would bring in William Jackson, acquire him. Look, trades within the division have happened before. Bring him in. Look at him as an outside corner option to challenge Anthony Brown. And if you believe he can, find rejuvenated form in Dallas, then you look at Anthony Brown competing with someone like Deron Bland, promising young slot corner rookie, and see if you can create some competition inside there. But I think Cowboys have to be feeling pretty good about where things stand right now ahead of the trade deadline. 5-2, Dak back, shaking off some rust, getting a victory. They get the Chicago Bears next up at home. I think that's an interesting one to look at for a team that goes, okay, best defense we've ever given Dak Prescott. Is our offense the most explosive thing in the world? No, that's why we are seeing, fans throw out names like Elijah Moore to Dallas. But we've just taken a hit to our strongest unit, our defense. Jordan Lewis, a versatile weapon. Let's bring in some talent there. Perhaps we can energize not just playing in a scheme that he might enjoy a little more, but hey, bringing in a failed free agent acquisition from a division rival adds a little bit of spice, can certainly be kind of a motivating factor there. What do you think about that, Jackson going to the Cowboys?
Man, I grew up in and around DC. I don't think the franchise would be fond of helping the Cowboys' title hopes. They love the fact that Dallas hasn't won a title since the mid-90s, and adding a player of Jackson's caliber to that defensive system, I think it's a perfect fit. If William Jackson were demanding a trade from the Bears or the Broncos, then yeah, I think he'd be a perfect candidate. I don't see him leaving Washington. And Laz also, happy Monday. Laz also, one of mine that I think it makes sense. I just don't know if it's going to happen, is because Washington, Ron Rivera in his third season, I don't know if he's going to embrace a rebuild. I don't know if he wants to be trading away. I think he wants to claw and scrapping his way to 6 or 7 wins and say we're building on something. Carson Wentz was injured and yada, 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 and it's the quarterback's fault or whatever. I look at a Deron Payne who's in a similar boat as William Jackson, and somebody who ticks some boxes for a trade candidate, hasn't been as bold as requesting it, but Deron Payne in the last year of his rookie deal, going to one of these fringe contenders. I have him going to the Atlanta Falcons, and I'll be quick with this. I know we have to move on. The Falcons, surprise, check the standings, check the ladder. They're tied atop the AFC South, the NFC South, with an altogether underwhelming Bucs team. The Falcons cannot rush the passer. Washington's defensive line has the highest rate of quarterback pressures without blitzing in the NFL because it's Payne, because it's Chase Young and Montez Sweat and John Allen, and that core that they have. You put him on a team in the Falcons who have 3 teams with fewer sacks than them, it starts to get a need fixed, and you can start to find a way. Falcons have serious issues with our offensive scheme. I don't know why they're drafting Kyle Pitts and Drake London where they are and then deploying them as they have. Different conversation for a different day. Anybody who watches that team says they need more pass rush and they need to be able to pressure the passer without bringing added bodies. Daron Payne fits that bill, and his profile fits somebody who a team in Washington spot, a distant fourth in their division, would be keen to sell.
That makes so much sense, Phil. It's almost like you and me should be a co-GM operation of one of these franchises. One more. We're going to move on. We are going to go rapid fire the rest of the way here for the next 15 minutes. With one more, Brad. Can we trade any offensive lineman to Chicago to protect Fields? I like Fields, but wish he had someone to protect him. I'm in lockstep with you about that. Unfortunately, it's just me and Phil will tell you, show before the show, production time, we were talking, and I was saying, what about Jawan Taylor to a team Chicago. To a team like Chicago? But it's just a question of, are these guys buyers at this point? From a big picture standpoint, I'd love to see them add any talent on the offensive line for the future. You just have to wonder what the philosophical agenda and priority is.
And you look at stats like pass block, win rate, and all that. Fields has time. The issue is he holds onto the ball too long, and his receivers aren't open. I think some of that's schematic. His unwillingness to try and throw people open, unwillingness to throw it away, guys not being able to create separation.
Yeah.
Of the offensive problems, I don't really fault the offensive line as much as the gross sack numbers would suggest.
The right side of the line hasn't been the worst part there, but yeah, it's kind of. It's lack of talent feeding into Justin Fields. He has so much talent himself, but one of his issues, as you mentioned, how robotic he can actually process or chooses to process, how long he holds onto the ball, that feeding into a receiving core that isn't giving you clear and wide and options early or at any point early in the route tree. That's an issue. All right, let's move on, Phil. Next thing, we are going rapid fire the rest of the way. We got to get you sidelined for Monday Night Football, Phil. It is time for... Do you want to intro this?
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls.
There it is. Children of all ages. The NFL Brekkie Show proudly brings to you its NFL Tag Team Champions of the World. Phil?
Tag Team Champions of the World of the Week. Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones. The reincarnation laws of Big Papa Pump, the quad god himself. Saquon Barkley, Quadzilla. He's Big Papa Pump, Scott Steiner. Daniel Jones can be the technician, Rick Steiner. These guys both ran for over 100 yards in a win over Jacksonville. You don't look at one half of them and think thunder and lightning, but Laz, this is a team. I mentioned this stat earlier. They trailed by 4 entering the fourth quarter. They completed 0 passes in the fourth quarter. They won by a touchdown. I don't know how that math works out, but here's some math I do know a little bit about. Daniel Jones rushed for over 100 yards. Has not happened for a Giants quarterback since darn near World War II, 1946. And 57 of those yards were on designed runs. 50 of those yards were on scrambles. So he's been able to improvise, make plays off script. And then on zone reads, when a defense collapses on Saquon Barkley, who, oh, by the way, 110 yards, going over 100 yards yet again, as is wont to happen, 4 catches out of the backfield. He's the number 2 running back in the NFL. None of that would surprise you about Saquon Barkley through 7 weeks if I told you that. Number 2 in the league in rushing. Thank goodness he's healthy. What would surprise you in terms of quarterback rush yards, number 2 in the NFL, Daniel Jones. The Madden default creative player, Daniel Jones, is number 2 in the NFL behind only Lamar Jackson in rushing yards. So that is why this team is moving the ball offensively, is that they've been able to, when teams collapse on Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones elects to keep, he has the pace to get 7, 12 yards in these chunk plays. And the Giants, here we sit, very much in playoff position, and a team that must be taken seriously.
Daniel Jones has always been a good athlete and a mobile football player. But he is being weaponized as now a good runner. He's improving as a good runner. What do you mean? He's as fast as he ever was. He's getting older. Maybe he's getting slower. No, but as a football runner of the football, he's being put in position and he is being coached and he is being placed to do a better job of it, a more direct and purposeful job of it, a more designed job of it. You get him rolling out and you don't really want to have to tackle him. You, as a defensive back, as a safety, as a linebacker, you're wondering, oh God, we've got play action here. We've got motion or whatever Daboll has cooked up there. We're dealing with all of that. And now we've got this guy on the move who's more than willing to tuck and run and can get 20 yards on us. That is a problem to deal with. And what a bizarre world that the NFC East has cooked up here, where you've got two teams in Philadelphia and New York that present such unique mobile quarterback problems, doing it in different ways, not lumping them in together. But right out of that little epicenter in the NFC East, you are having to come up with some very creative solutions. And as you mentioned before, the stats about how little he's had to pass or how little he has passed in these game-winning drives, that comes down to it. It's situationally tough, frustrating football from a team that knows exactly where its strengths lie and are weaponizing those. So, deserving tag team champions.
The confidence to not call a pass play and still know they can move the football forward a number of different ways.
And as you mentioned, Saquon Barkley is just a total delight to watch out there. The jump cuts, the mobility, the agility, the lateral stuff, it is back to full flourish. Yeah, I still wince every time he does it because of his injury history, but him being back in the league, whether you're a Giants fan or you've never watched a game of NFL in your life, putting that game on, putting that tape on, watching his work, he is phenomenal. He is so rare. And it is a absolute benefit to the NFL that he's back and healthy. That's our tag team champions. I love the Steiner brothers nod there. I think we may have Giants fans start barking like Rick Steiner used to do back in the day. But Phil, those are our tag team champs. And now we're going to pathway on to a more singular award for week 7.
Yes, Laz, we're talking about running the football, and the story over the last 2 weeks has been how well this young man has done it. It is our next gen, brought to you by the next gen Ford Everest. Conquer every day with the next gen Ford Everest, highlighting the next generation of player. And Seattle had one of their primary running options go down to a season-ending injury. We knew they drafted this gentleman, Kenneth Walker III, in the second round out of Michigan State. I watched him beat up on Michigan, their rival, in a rivalry game around this time last year, and I thought, man, that guy needs to be getting some more NFL pub. It's not a league in which we take running backs in the first round, but you look how well Breece Hall performed, and you look what Kenneth Walker has now done as a feature back in Seattle. Maybe we reconsider more of the Najee Harris level late first round investments for players that fit this profile. Laz, this segment is sponsored by a vehicle, and that is the speed at which Kenneth Walker runs. He was clocked on his 74-yard touchdown run at 35.6 kilometers per hour. It is the fastest speed in the NFL of any ball carrier this season. This is not somebody who's slight, not somebody who's a lean frame. He's built like a Ford Everest, and he drives about as fast as you can in a school zone. He had 123 rush yards before contact. Now, part of that has been an offensive line who has been performing quite well, and part of that, frankly, is pace, because you can only contact what you can touch. And since Kenneth Walker III has become the feature back in Seattle, Game 1, 21 carries, 97 yards and a touchdown. Game 2 last week, 23 carries, 168 yards, 2 touchdowns, as the Seahawks go into SoFi and get a win over the Chargers, 37-23.
Over 7 yards a carry for a running back that even had the word unrefined tagged to him coming out, that there was still levels of sophistication you could add to him as a runner, but the physicality is there, the speed is there. And while the Ford Everest, the next gen, is a very refined automobile, but for him, the idea that the talent and the upside is it's only just the tip that we are touching on here. It is only the tip of the iceberg that we have seen. We have so much more to see from an offensive unit that you mentioned, the offensive line doing a good job. They have rebuilt there. They've got 2 pillars. They drafted 2 rookies to be their pillars on the offensive line there. And that we've got so much more to tap into with a running back that can bulldoze, can power through contact. Look at his touchdown run and just dragging would-be tacklers over the goal line with him. And then the breakaway down the sideline looks like a Ford Everest next gen in the open fields there. Nice country road, just powering down the highway. That's what it looked like as he broke down the sideline there. this is as exciting a fit as you will find for running back. And while, yes, we lost Breece Hall this week, and those two were kind of a fantastic rookie pair to come in here, the highway is set now. The path is set for Kenneth Walker to take this rookie season, and there is not much that can stop him. If he's going to deliver these type of performances, yeah, we're looking at next-gen honors for Week 7, but we could very well be looking at Offensive Rookie of the Year honors by the end of the 2022 season.
And Laws, what a credit it is to the Seattle draft class that on draft night wasn't heralded. We kind of thought it was a little quirky, a little funky. And here we go, 2 weeks in, back-to-back, next-gen Fort Everest, next-gen players go to the Pacific Northwest. Tariq Woolen last week, and this week, Kenneth Walker the third. And it doesn't seem like this will be the last week that he's a candidate. Laws, an unfortunate but available segue. It is with similar breakaway speed that you are creating space in our propaganda competition. Credit to you last week, the only winning wager, Austin Eckler over 4.5 catches. He was right at the cusp. And then Justin Herbert went back to check down Charlie mode. Meanwhile, Melvin Gordon, I didn't know he was getting benched. And also, I should have known better that Denver would take 11 days to script an opening scoring drive and then do nothing after that. So my double result crumbled. So Laws, you have honors again, as your margin is now 6.94 units as we are 7 weeks through the season. That is a poor trajectory, but I am sticking to my strategy. I'm trusting the process. You, though, have the honors, my friend.
Thank you, and deserving honors they are. All right, let's start off with the ground game here. You mentioned that there's some woolly conditions that we're dealing with on Monday Night Football, and the Bears taking on the Patriots. You're going to be their sideline. So I look to the running game. I look at Ramondre Stevenson for the New England Patriots. I think they'll have plenty of opportunities to run the ball. I think they'll have the ball coming back to them after perhaps some short series from the Chicago Bears. Let's get into Bill Belichick versus young quarterbacks at another time. But we know that he has a habit of putting the clamps down on these young, talented, but young and green quarterbacks. And Justin Fields still falls into that category. I think Stevenson gets lots of opportunity here. His number is 63.5 yards on the ground. I'm taking the over on that at $1.88. Yes, Harris is back in the backfield, but nothing says to me that the way this backfield has been trending and up against the Chicago Bears defense that is giving up over 150 yards on the ground a game, you're getting almost 5 yards a pop there. And look, yards per carry is not the only stat that matters when it comes to running back. There are far more intricate, detailed analytics, but what it does tell you is that en masse, when you run that much against them, these are the type of results you're going to get. And I think that's the key word there, mass. I think they'll hit the critical mass of amounts of carries, of time of possession for the Patriots today. I think Stevenson cruises over 63.5, $1.88.
Yeah, Laz, if I had to wager, I agree with it. I looked at the Ramondre Stevenson market. My concern is he going to get the 16 carries that he might need to get there? If he can get there in 13 or 14, I think it's more likely than not that it hits. But a couple points that you hit on, the weather, the fact that both of these quarterbacks are, I think, facing some of the more difficult opposition in terms of just the defensive backfields they're facing. You mentioned Bill Belichick's terrific history against first and second year quarterbacks. That holds true. And also Justin Fields just doesn't throw the ball. Last week against Washington was an anomaly, and still they only had 7 points. He had 27 pass attempts. Prior to that, 88 pass attempts in 5 weeks. Fewest for a quarterback in 5 weeks as a starter or a team over 5 weeks in 40 years. So he is at historic level of not throwing the ball. And then you couple that Mac Jones is going up against a secondary that has more interceptions and touchdowns allowed through the air. We have a market, Fields and Jones, to combine for under 389.5 pass yards at $1.83. It's a conservative total, but I just need to get back on the winning track. I think Mac Jones coming off of his ankle sprain with the rain, the Patriots are going to have a diverse running attack. I don't think Jones is throwing for 321 like he did against Baltimore. I don't think Fields is throwing for more than 130. So I feel good with 389.5, taking the under combined on a wet. I think we're going to have some clear weather for the first half. The rain's probably coming back in the second half, but it has been pouring rain all day. It was a harrowing drive on my hour-and-a-half drive here to Foxborough, Mass. So $1.83 is a number I like there.
Yeah, my second one plays right into that. You mentioned the weather. You mentioned the matchups here. Hunter Henry under 29.5 yards receiving. He hasn't gone over that total with regularity. He's not featured heavily as a prolific part of a passing game, whether that's under Mac Jones or under Bailey Zappi there. I don't think the onus is going to be on the Patriots to have to chuck the ball around, as you've mentioned. So does Hunter Henry get a red zone look? Very well, maybe, perhaps that's what we see. But his production, I think, is more likely to come in that area than having a big yardage day. And you mentioned the Chicago Bears defense, pass defense, has done a decent job against tight ends. In particular, there has not been tight ends going off against that Chicago Bears defense so far this season. Maybe that is part of the numbers we talked about before, his success rushing against his team. But yeah, I don't think this is a matchup that sees Henry go off for 50, 60, 70 plus yards, under 29.5, $1.88. That's the second one I'm going on there, as we expect this one to be perhaps a more ground fought battle than one that flies through the skies.
One that would make George S. Halas proud, the Bears founder, the second most wins in NFL history, tied with Bill Belichick, who can pass Papa Bear by beating his Bears today. It'll be a subplot of this game. Laws, it's a strategy that I think would make Halas proud in terms of just running the ball. I don't think the productivity is going to make him proud necessarily, but I think Justin Fields is going to get his touches. And my second wager is Justin Fields to go over 41.5 rush yards at $1.91. It's a number he's cleared each of the last 4 games. I was toying with the idea of him going over 7.5 carries. His season low is 7. That was $1.88. It's a 3-cent difference. But Laws, as we claw our way back up the ladder, I need every cent I can get. So I'm going $1.91 on the over Justin Fields rush yards market. But that just shows I like a lot of the over carries, rush attempts, over rush yards markets, as I think you do here as well. And a lot of them have juice on the over because you're looking out the window, and even though the rain seems to have stopped, it is just like a damp looking day. The ball's going to be wet. There's going to be some turnovers, so I wouldn't hate a fumble market or an interception market. It's just going to be that kind of game where points are at a premium. That tends to favor the Patriots, and that's where I'm leaning today. But I think it's a good opportunity for your boy to start to turn his luck around in the propaganda. I got a belt to defend like I'm the tag team champion.
And with all that in-depth thought, analysis, well-prepared takes, and insight into how this game could possibly play out, we look forward to a 33-28 barn burner there on Monday Night Football. Phil, we're going to get out of here. Do you want to land the ship for us? I would love to be wrong. I would love for this to be a race to 40. I don't think that's the case this time around. But Laws, we do have to land the plane. I do need to get over to Gillette Stadium. This has been the Brekkie NFL Show, presented by the Next Gen Ford Everest. Conquer every day with the Next Gen Ford Everest. We hope we have kept you entertained and informed, even though good friends separated by, 15,000 kilometers or so. He is Laurie Horesh. I am Phil Murphy. Thank you for hanging out with us here on the NFL Brekkie Show, and keep it on ESPN.com for all the latest in the NFL.